My name is Claire Bennett, and this story begins on the day I made the hardest decision of my life, refusing to sign my own father's business papers. People assume it was easy, that maybe I was greedy, or angry at my father, or just a stubborn daughter throwing away her family's legacy. But the truth wasn't that simple. It was so much deeper that by the time I finally understood it, my entire life had already changed. Let me start from the beginning. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside Manchester, England. My father, Richard Bennett, was a self-made businessman. He'd spent 25 years building a textile and manufacturing company from nothing but a small workshop and a loan from his own father. I remember him waking up before sunrise every single day. He'd be at the factory before 6 and wouldn't come home until well after dark. My mother used to say, "Your father only knows how to live for his work." And in a strange way that was true, but he loved us the same way he loved his business. Quietly. Through effort, not through words. I had a younger brother, Daniel, 3 years my junior. We were completely different people. I was the reader, the planner, drawn to numbers and structure from the time I was a teenager. Daniel was the risk-taker, always chasing some new idea, some new venture, restless in a way that used to worry my mother. My father wanted me to eventually take over the company. He started bringing me into the office when I was still in college, letting me sit in on meetings, showing me the ledgers, introducing me to clients. Slowly, I became part of that business, not just as his daughter, but as someone who actually worked there. But as the years passed, I began noticing things that didn't quite add up. I was 24 when it happened. I just finished my degree and was working full-time at my father's company. One afternoon, I was alone in the office going through old files when I came across one I'd never seen before. It was a property file, a piece of land my father had purchased outside the city, one that had never once been mentioned at home. I assumed it was some forgotten investment. But when I looked closer at the documents, I saw the land was registered under a completely different name, someone called Martin Reeves. I wanted to ask my father about it, but his mood had been tense for weeks. He'd spend hours on the phone, arguing quietly, then suddenly snap at the smallest thing. My mother noticed it too. She kept saying there was something eating at him that he wasn't telling any of us. I let it go. I buried myself in work instead. Time passed. 2 years later, when I was 26, things got stranger. My father told me the company structure was going to change, that he wanted to restructure everything through something called a trust, and that I'd need to sign some papers to make it official. I asked him, "What are these papers actually for, Dad?" He said, "It's just a legal formality, sweetheart. It's to protect the business. You need to sign so the company transfers properly to you and Daniel." But when I actually read through the documents, there were clauses I didn't understand. One line said that by signing, I would be giving up my individual claim to the company's assets entirely. Everything would go into a new trust controlled by someone else. Not me. Not Daniel. Something about it felt deeply wrong. I asked my father directly, "Who's the trustee here? And why would we give up our own claim to the company we've worked for?" His face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "You don't need to know all the details. Just sign it." That was the first time he'd ever spoken to me like that. There was a sharpness in his voice I wasn't used to, and it made me certain he was hiding something big. My mother tried to reason with me too. "Whatever your father's doing, he's doing it for this family. Just sign the papers, Claire. Stop asking so many questions." But I couldn't ignore what my gut was telling me. Something deep down said that if I signed those papers, I'd be handing over my entire future, and Daniel's too, to someone I'd never even met. So I made my decision. I wouldn't sign. Not until I knew the whole truth. That decision set off a storm at home. My father barely spoke to me for a week. We avoided eye contact at the dinner table. My mother was caught in the middle, clearly exhausted by the tension. Even Daniel was confused. He told me, "Claire, just do what Dad's asking. Why are you fighting this so hard?" But I held my ground. Months passed. Things only got worse. My father started keeping me away from the office, as if he wanted distance between me and whatever he was trying to hide. I began to wonder if I'd made a terrible mistake. If I was accusing my own father of something awful just because of a piece of paper I didn't understand. Relatives, neighbors, family, friends, they all had opinions. That I was being ungrateful. That my father had worked his whole life for us and here I was refusing to trust him. Those months were some of the hardest of my life. Every night I lay awake wondering if I'd done the right thing. Or if I'd broken something that could never be fixed. 2 years passed in that silence. My relationship with my father shrank down to only the essentials: polite, distant, careful. He kept the business away from me, and eventually I distanced myself from it too. I took a job at a small accounting firm just to stand on my own feet. Daniel, meanwhile, became fully absorbed into the company. He became my father's right hand. There were moments I felt a pang of jealousy, like maybe I'd thrown away my own place in the family. But something in me still couldn't regret the decision I'd made. During this time, something else happened that I'll never forget. I was out running errands one afternoon when I saw a man I recognized. The same name from that old property file. Martin Reeves. He was talking with an old family friend, someone who used to work for my father years ago. I found the courage to ask who he was. I was told that Martin Reeves was an old friend of my father's, that years earlier the two of them had gone into a few investments together. That eased my mind a little. Maybe that property really was just a relic of an old friendship. Nothing sinister. But there was still a quiet question sitting in the back of my mind. If that were true, why had my father never simply told me? And what did those new trust papers, the ones I'd refused to sign, have to do with any of it? Then came the day that turned my whole world around. I was at my desk at work when my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I answered. "Hello, this is Barrister Samuel Hayes calling. Am I speaking with Claire Bennett?" "Yes, this is Claire." "Who's calling, sorry?" "I'm your father's solicitor, Richard Bennett. I need to arrange a meeting with you as soon as possible. Would tomorrow work?" My stomach dropped. My father had never once mentioned a solicitor by that name. I couldn't think of a single reason he'd need to send a lawyer to speak with me directly. "Is everything all right?" I asked, my voice already shaking. "We'll discuss everything at the meeting," he said, and the call ended. I didn't sleep that night. My mind ran through every possibility. Was my father sick? Had the business collapsed? Was there some legal issue that required my involvement? The next day, at the appointed time, I arrived at Barrister Hayes's office, an impressive space in the heart of the city's business district. The moment I stepped inside, I knew this wasn't going to be an ordinary meeting. He asked me to sit, and then he told me something that would change the way I saw everything. "Miss Bennett," he began, "your father came to me 3 years ago. He wanted to restructure his company, but the reason behind it was something he chose to keep from you, at least at first." My throat tightened. "What reason?" "Around that time, your father received a serious diagnosis. His heart condition had progressed further than anyone realized. The doctors told him there was no way to know how much time he had, that something could happen at any moment. When he heard that, he decided to restructure the company so that if anything happened to him, the business wouldn't fall apart or get tangled up in legal disputes." My heart was pounding. Then why not just tell me? And that trust, who was actually meant to control it? The barrister smiled gently. "That trustee was me, Miss Bennett. Your father chose me specifically because he wanted someone neutral to protect the company's assets until he felt you and Daniel were truly ready to run it yourselves. He was terrified that if something happened to him suddenly, and neither of you were prepared yet, the business could collapse within months, or worse, someone from outside the family could take advantage of the situation. But I never signed," I said, stunned. "I refused." "Exactly," the barrister said. "And that's precisely what made your father proudest." I was completely lost. "What do you mean?" He placed a folder on the desk in front of me. "Miss Bennett, the papers you were asked to sign contained a hidden clause your father had deliberately included. A kind of test. If you had signed without question, control of the company would have transferred entirely to the trust. You would have remained only a beneficiary, with no real decision-making power, permanently, regardless of whether your father recovered or not." "Why would he do that?" I asked. "Because he wanted to see which of his children truly understood responsibility, and which one would simply trust blindly and sign a document without reading it. He designed this test partly because of what happened to an old business partner of his, Martin Reeves. Martin had signed a similar agreement once without reading it carefully, and it cost him almost everything he owned. Your father never wanted that to happen to you." Suddenly, that old property file made sense. "So Martin's land." "Yes, that's part of the same story. Your father helped him quietly after he lost nearly everything. Registered a piece of land in his name so he'd have something to fall back on. He never told anyone, because Martin didn't want his situation known within the community. Tears welled up in my eyes. All these years I had misjudged my own father. I thought he was hiding something shameful, something he didn't want me to see. But the truth was he'd been protecting me the entire time. Trying to teach me never to sign my life away blindly, to question everything, to understand before I agreed to anything. The barrister explained that my father had arranged all of this because he was about to undergo a major, high-risk heart surgery. He wanted to make sure that if the surgery didn't go well, the company would remain safe until Daniel and I were both truly ready to take it on. When's the surgery? I asked, panic rising in my chest. Next week, the barrister said. Your father instructed me that if you refused to sign, which he suspected you would, I was to tell you the truth before the surgery happened. I left the office immediately and drove straight home. My chest was heavy with a mix of shame, love, and fear that I might already be too late. When I got there, I found my father sitting alone in his study, staring out the window. He looked thinner than I remembered. Something I'd been too distracted to notice these past months was now painfully obvious. Dad, I said, my voice trembling. I know everything now. He turned to look at me, and there was a warmth in his eyes I hadn't seen since I was a child. I knew you wouldn't sign, he said softly. That's exactly why I know you can run this company, because you don't just trust blindly. You actually understand. I walked over and for the first time in years hugged my father. We both cried, years of silence, years of misunderstanding, all of it melting away in that single moment. The following week, my father underwent his operation. It was one of the hardest periods our family had ever faced. We sat outside the hospital all night praying, waiting. My mother could barely hold herself together. Daniel sat quietly beside me and I kept thinking, if I had signed those papers, would we even be sitting here together like this? Or would we have been scattered, caught up in some legal mess with a trust none of us had ever wanted? Thankfully, the surgery was a success. My father recovered slowly, and the very first thing he said when he came home from the hospital was, from now on, the three of us run this business together, Claire, Daniel, and me. No trust. No hidden clauses. Everything changed after that. My father brought both Daniel and me fully into the business, not just as figureheads this time, but with real responsibility. I was given control of finance and strategy. Daniel took charge of new ventures and expansion. Most importantly, there were no more secrets between us. My father told us everything, the company's full history, every decision he'd made, his mistakes, his successes. We didn't just learn how to run a business from him. We learned how to live, patience, understanding, and a kind of love he never knew how to put into words, but always showed through his actions. We also met Martin Reeves properly for the first time. My father invited him over himself, and in front of the whole family, told the true story of their friendship and the help he'd quietly given all those years ago. Martin explained how blind trust had once cost him nearly everything, and how my father had helped him rebuild without ever asking for anything in return. This story taught me that sometimes, love isn't shown by silently agreeing to everything. Sometimes it's shown by asking the hard questions. That if we truly care about someone, whether it's a parent, a business, or our own future, we owe it to ourselves to understand what we're taking on before we accept it. And sometimes the decision that feels the hardest in the moment, refusing, questioning, standing firm, is exactly the decision that makes us stronger. Today, when I sit in my office across from my father's desk, I still remember the day I refused to sign those papers. And I'm grateful I did. Because if I had trusted blindly that day without asking a single question, I might not be sitting here at all. And this relationship I now have with my father, this love, this understanding, might never have existed.